So you're mostly not, I don't want to say self-taught, but you learned how to read and write Tibetan and
I
just
was taught I was taught Tibetan grammar by Lama Mikmar, and he's helped me over the years do stuff, and other Tibetans have helped me. But mostly my Tibetan has been come about because since I'm not an academic and I don't have to deal with students and I don't have to write papers and I don't have to grade papers, I can pretty much just read Tibetan books.
yeah.
So that's what I did. And when I was in my retreat, that's all I did, apart from doing sadhana. I brought all my Tibetan books with me and a computer and sat in my retreat room. And when I wasn't practicing, I was translating.
Oh, okay, okay. So you're just really self-driven and motivated, and you have a natural talent for this, for translations.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I tried to learn Japanese, but it didn't work out so well. Back in 86, 85, 86. Uh, but in general, I don't consider myself to be talented with languages, but I was motivated to read commentaries in Tibetan that I knew would never, ever be translated. So my approach was pretty simple. When I went into my retreat, I got sick and tired of carrying around, 8.5 by 11 things in English that also sounded really like high church text,
Yeah.
the holy, I go for refuge to the holy guru, the holy Buddhas, the holy Sangha, the holy Dharma, holy, 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 holy. And so I was like, screw this. And I decided that Tibetan pages were much more convenient to hold, So I translated my sadhanas out of Tibetan into English. Then I threw my translations away.
Mm.
So I was only relying on the Tibetan.
Oh,
Then I started translating commentaries on my sadhanas so I could understand the
yeah.
sadhanas better. Then I started just translating whatever seized me at the time to translate, and that's pretty much how I've been. And then I became uh, pretty much since 2000, particularly since 2000, and after I got out of my 3-year retreat, I pretty much focused most of my attention on translating mostly focused on translating Dzogchen texts, but I've also translated a lot of Sakya stuff,
But
almost all, and the sadhanas for various lamas.
yeah. And so you said, you got sick of hearing like holy, holy, holy. Is there a different, what's the different flavor when you read it in Tibetan versus the way it's translated? It's less of that?
Well, they have a lot of this honorific language. It just
Yeah.
doesn't sound Catholic.
That's right. Wonderful.
Everybody translate like a lot of people translate Dampa as holy.
Yeah.
The Dampa is from Sanskrit Otama, or means something like highest.
Yeah.
You
That's,
know, but that sounds weird in English. The highest Dharma, the highest Guru, the highest this, the highest that. So I prefer sublime.
okay, sure. I really appreciate that though. I feel like we still have too much of that and it's a little heavy and it's a
Yeah,
bit of a turnoff too.
like sin. I don't use the word sin. Misdeed.
Misdeed,
Yeah.
non-virtue.
Non-virtue for Migewa, misdeed for Dikpa.
Yeah.
Dikpa really means something that stings. That's why the word for misdeed and the word for scorpion in Tibetan is the same.
Wow, that's so cool. That's one
Something that stings you.
really.
Yeah. There's a very famous story about Padmasambhava, Guru Trakpo, right? He holds a scorpion. He holds a scorpion by the tail and he's got his vajra in this hand. So the reason why he's holding the scorpion by the tail is because that scorpion represents the Gyalpo spirit named Pekar. And so this Gyalpo showed up as a young monk at Samye when Padmasambhava was teaching. And he said to Padmasambhava, he said, "What's the one thing you're most afraid of in the world?" And Padmasambhava said, "Well, the most thing I'm most afraid of in the world is dikpa, misdeeds." But Pekar was because Pekar is actually a foreign deity somehow. He misunderstood Padmasambhava to say that Padmasambhava was afraid of scorpions. So then the next day he manifested this huge scorpion in the Yarlung Valley. Padmasambhava manifested as the wrathful guru and seized him by the tail and, went to go dash his brains out.
Mhm.
So we can understand something from that.
That's yeah, there's like a more, I think, and I get this in the Chinese definitely traditions as well. It's like these traditions, because of the way they're set up, more tribal, more land-based, more nature-based, there's
Mhm.
more of a direct feeling sensation in the language than Westerners with their overthinking and conceptuality and religiosity that we tend to put on these traditions that's not there as just because of translation back and forth. Is that, is that
I mean, I agree with you, and I think it has a lot to do with monotheism, frankly. Monotheistic traditions disregard the world. That comes out of this the Gnostic tradition, which regards the world as fundamentally evil.
Mhm. Original sin, all this nonsense?
You whereas I mean, Gnostic traditions, like the second century, third century AD,
Mm.
and very dualistic. The world is bad, this kind of thing, and also nature is not important. You
Obviously,
know, that's obviously capitalism is right in that vein.
that's exactly right.
It's very nice being in Japan because it's been a long time since I've been in a Buddhist country, and being in a Buddhist country, and also Japan is sort of imbued with Shinto. And that was actually, honestly, I mean, I was in Japan before, about 40 years ago. And, I know a lot about Buddhism. So the Buddhist part was great. It was really wonderful to go to some of the temples I'd visited back in the day. But what I really got, there's a lot of similarities between, not Bun, but there's a lot of similarities between the sort of Tibetan intuitions about the place, and Japanese indigenous intuitions about place, and Native American indigenous intuitions about place, and purification. And it's not that the world is impure. All of these, I was thinking, reflecting on this last night. In fact, I'm going to write a Substack about it, I think, if I have time, with everything else I have to do. So it's not that the world is an impure place. So for example, most people don't realize that the origin of song offerings in Tibet has to do with the contamination of the land of Tibet by the miscarriage of a child that was incestuously conceived. And that's why Padmasambhava wrote the first song offering for Tibetans, because there had been this miscarriage of an incestuously conceived child, and the fetus touched the land and contaminated it. And that made all of the gods all the gods and demons of Tibet angry. So he wrote this song offering it's called the Ngol song. He wrote this song offering to pacify them. And the thing that we understand in song offerings is that rather than the theistic view, which views the world as contaminating us, just look at how we relate to the world. Bacteria, body odor, everything. We regard everything as something outside of us we have to defend against, as if we're the ones being contaminated. But the indigenous point of view is that we're the ones who are engaged in the contamination, and we need to apologize for the way we are contaminating the world. And you see that in Tibetan song offerings, you see that in Shinto ritual, you see that in Native American rituals. I'm not sure about other European indigenous traditions, but anyway, that's one thing that really stuck out to me.
You have the arrogance and humility there, where there's an arrogance on one level and then the other. And I feel like this is, if you have that arrogance, how are you ever going to understand interconnectedness? It's not possible.
I agree with you. I agree with you. That's true. And so that was the kind of thing I took away from me the last time I was in Japan, because we were there for several weeks and we went to a lot of Shinto shrines and a lot of Buddhist shrines. First thing we did, though, when we got to Japan, because I'd been there a long time ago, and also because when I was in Colorado last year, in Colorado there's a small shrine of the chief kami of all Japan, Amaterasu no Kami. She's supposed to be, according to Japanese mythology, she's the progenitor of the Japanese imperial line. And so her shrine is about, I don't know, it's about her. There, she has three main shrines, but they're about, it's about maybe 2 hours from Kyoto. on the coast. And it's an amazing place where one of the reasons why they do this is to preserve, I think, the sort of traditional way of building Japanese houses. So every 20 years, they take apart the shrine of the shrines at Ise, and they completely rebuild them with everything brand new. And they've been doing this for 1,200 years. And they do it every 20 years. What they do is that when they tear down one place, they build the new place with all brand new wood, everything. Everything that goes into it has to be brand new, except for this one mirror, which has been passed down for more than 1,000 years. This is the main sort of object of devotion, because the mirror represents the sun rising from the east, and so it's held in this little stand which represents clouds in the ocean. It's very beautiful. So anyway, she's a sun goddess. So she's kind of similar to Marichi in a way. Marichi is supposed to be a bodhisattva and an emanation of Tara. I have more of an idea that, we have this Tibetan concept of Tenma, like the 12 Tenma, like Dorje Yudrunma and Tseringma, etc. Dorje Yudrunma also holds a mirror, but it's more for divination than anything else. So Amaterasu no Mikami is kind of like the Tenma of Japan. And actually, there's lots of these gods, and the pantheon of kami in Japan is kind of overwhelming. Some of them are foreign gods like Hachiman. But in any case, the main point is that the Japanese have this idea of places that are sacred because they're inhabited by this sort of powerful energies, whatever you want to call them. Tibet has the same idea. For example, Norbu Rinpoche told the story, some people just think they can do song offerings wherever, right? Norbu Rinpoche told the story about how this man, he didn't want to do his song offering on the ground because he was afraid of hurting whatever critters lived underneath the soil. So he saw this really nice rock. So he said, oh, fantastic, I can just do my song offering on this rock and nothing will happen. It'll be great. But then he started having lots of problems for years. Like everything in his life was going wrong, just all kinds of problems. And finally, he went to an astrologer, somebody who does calculation, and trying to figure out exactly what had happened, what had gone wrong. And the astrologer said, well, you did this song offering on this rock, but that rock wasn't just an uninhabited rock. It happened to be inhabited by a Tsen. Tsen are those demons in Tibet that are depicted as red, riding a red horse, wearing traditional boiled leather cuirass, usually holding a spear and some kind of a hook. Okay, so like Siu Marpo, for example. So, for example, I'm sure you're familiar with Achi Choki Dolma because you're a Drikun Kagyü. So Achi is kind of like she's in like what Tibetans call a Menmo. Menmo means something like, Menmo really just means like woman. It's an ancient Tibetan, but it's connected with the word for medicine. And so of the class of the 12 Tenma, 4 of them are Menmo, meaning they're beautiful. And, so Achi Chogi Droma, she rides a horse and she has her attributes and she's beautiful, supposedly Jigten Sumgun's grandmother, great-grandmother. But in any case, so Amaterasu no Mikami is like the great-great-great-great-great-grandmother of the Emperor of Japan. That's their idea. So there's a lot of Tibetan clans that also place the origin of their clans in what they call Usel La, gods from the luminous dimension, gods of light. And then in a later system, after Buddhism came to Tibet, this was sort of equated with the Abhisara Loka, but it's not the same. So like the Sakyas, for example, they have this idea that they come from a Usel La that descended on top of a mountain and then conquered the human beings. The Che clan, same thing, except for this, where they descended was in Tajikistan, and then they came through Tibet and intimidated the king of Shangshung, and then moved into the I forget what valley it is, Mongyul Valley, Mongyul. And there's a lot of Tibetan clans in eastern Tibet that have the same idea, that their progenitors are basically these So the Japanese people also think that the origin of Japanese people in general are these kami, these gods, which are more or less similar. So they have a very different idea, and they have a very so like and then you can bless trees and stones and like we were in Australia 2 years ago when we went to Uluru, and so in Uluru they have this it's this big red rock in the middle of the outback, very famous. You've seen pictures of it, and they have these very interesting patterns in the stone. And the Aborigines use these patterns in the stone to record stories. They use them as kind of mnemonic devices. They have all of their mythology wrapped up in how they tell stories about these stones and these stones' faces. And apparently, there's an outer version, and then an inner version, and a secret version, and it just kind of goes. But the point is, in Japan, they also have a similar idea. A lot of their, and Tibet too, a lot of their places are very wrapped up with mythology and stories about place and time and power. And so that's was one of the things was nice about being in Japan was like just sort of you can sense this more integration, respect for the natural world that you don't see in theistic cultures.
No, no, and I think it creates a lot of anxiety
Oh,
because
absolutely.
lack of.
Yeah, we're basically neurotic.
Yeah,
Totally. Very neurotic culture.
yeah. All right. Yeah, this has been wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate
Sure,
it.
my pleasure. I'm